Welcome to the weekly update. It's December 18th and I'm Robert Barwick. Today I have two topics to discuss. One, you can always rely on our politicians when you're in a crisis, if you are a bank. And two, we have a special update on the Murray-Darling Basin mobilisation. So first, you can always rely on our politicians when you're in a crisis, if you are a bank. So we have a escalating global financial banking crisis. You look at on Wednesday, for those who've been following the Irish situation, the Irish Parliament voted up the bailout by a very narrow margin, 75 against, 81 in favour. That margin was because the three independents in the Irish Parliament were persuaded to vote in favour of it. If they had voted against it, it would have been a deadlock 78 all. You can imagine the excruciating pressure that they were put under to do that. Now, so from the standpoint of the City of London bailout machine, whose job is to make sure every government buckles and performs these bailouts, they think they've had success. However, sometime around late January, the Irish people go to a general election and they will get to have the final say on this. And they are not in the mood to support this bailout. For example, the Fianna Fáil party, which is the government party of Ireland, have a 90% disapproval rating right now. 90%. This is incredible. So what that tells you is this Irish bailout, and therefore the global financial system, is hanging by a thread. Now, in that context, Australian Treasurer Wayne Swan last Sunday unveiled his banking reforms. And in effect, what this is Wayne Swan and the government galloping to the rescue of Australia's banks. Now, they'll never put it that way because they don't want the public to think that our banks need rescuing, but they desperately do, and that's what they're doing. Now, Wayne Swan is following on from the warning that Joe Hockey made, that we've covered in these reports a couple of weeks ago, where Hockey all of a sudden seemed to stumble over the fact of what the CEC had been warning about for 2 years, which is the huge volume of foreign borrowings that our banks rely on make them extremely vulnerable to the global financial situation by virtue of that fact alone. There's many other vulnerabilities, but that is one. And Hockey warned that especially coming into next year, when our banks would be having to roll over those borrowings, but at a time where they will be competing in an unprecedented way with a lot of governments in the world also seeking to roll over their debts, our banks would be elbowed out of the way and therefore have extreme difficulty. Now, what does this mean? If they can't continue borrowing from offshore, it means they will not be able to keep lending at the rate they have been lending into the property market in Australia. Now, the property market is a bubble. The International Monetary Fund 2 days ago said that Australia's property market is 10% overvalued. Well, it's good that they're acknowledging it's overvalued, but they're lying through their teeth. 10%, what a joke. It's more like 100% overvalued, and maybe even more. There are historical averages that you can apply to see that, and one of those is that the historical ratio of household income to property value is 3-to-1, and Australia's is running at 7-to-1. And we are the last surviving property bubble in the world, but that is the nature of our mortgage market. It is a bubble, but it's a bubble that our banks are totally exposed to, as we've covered here before. If they can't keep that bubble up, and if the bubble does crash, if this dramatic drop-off in auction clearance rates that we're seeing in the capital cities right now continues, and the market crashes, our banks crash with it. Now, we've reported on this program and in our press releases before that at the height of the financial crisis, the government, Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard, Wayne Swan, etc., introduced the first homeowners grant not to make property cheaper, not to make it more affordable for first home buyers as they claim, but deliberately to drive up property prices because they know they've got to keep this bubble up and the banks know that. So, but if the government can only do so much, if the banks can't keep lending money to people who are who've fallen for the con and want to buy property, then the property bubble will collapse that way. So what Wayne Swan has come up with is a way that our banks do not have to be reliant on overseas sources of funding for their foreign borrowings. They can access pools of money hitherto unavailable to them from here in Australia. And what are those pools of money? Our $1.3 trillion superannuation industry. And this is the heart of Wayne Swan's scheme. Now, he's basically proposing to feed the banks our super funds. Use the super funds as a bailout, in other words. Now, we just issued a press release this week. There is no difference in practice with what Wayne Swan's proposing and what the Irish government was ordered to do by the IMF, which was steal the Irish pension funds as part of its IMF mandated bailout. The only difference is the Irish know it's stealing. Aussies are being told this is going to be an investment. If you're shocked that your super may be used as a bailout, don't be. The CEC certainly wasn't, because we've always known that when Paul Keating and Bill Kelty, traitors to the Labor Party tradition of fighting the money power, actually invented this private superannuation system, it was always designed to be a bailout. It's been bailing out the stock market for 2 decades. Ask yourself what heights the stock market would have gotten to if it hadn't been fed over the last 2 decades by $1.3 trillion in compulsory inputs mandated by law by the government. Your supposed retirement funds have been shoveled into it by law, not by your choice. Where would the market have been without that money being put in by law? It's not a market, it's a Ponzi scheme. And now this is an even more blatant attempt at a bailout. You look at the difference between our private superannuation industry and the American system of social security as designed by US President Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s. In the social security system, every worker pays into a government-controlled social security fund, and retired people have a guaranteed amount of money paid to them out of that fund. And that system guarantees the welfare of the American people. There's all this malarkey at the moment about it being bankrupt. The Social Security Fund isn't bankrupt. The American economy is bankrupt. And it's not Social Security that bankrupted it, it's Wall Street and free trade. You have a productive economy that is a beautiful way to fund people's retirement, and that's why Roosevelt designed it that way. Our way, under Keating and Kelty's scam from the late 80s of private superannuation, has always been designed to be a bailout. You'll have the ridiculous situation, if this Wayne Swan scheme is implemented, where blue-collar workers may end up foreclosing on their own homes. Let me just explain that. What Swan has allowed, or is proposing, is that banks will be allowed to sell what are called covered bonds, and that would make them very attractive as investments to private superannuation funds. Now, covered bonds are bonds that are tied to the product that the money in the bond is used to fund. And in the case of banking, it's going to be mainly mortgages. So super funds will be buying bonds that are tied to mortgages. And in many cases, you will find that those mortgages, some of those mortgages, are held by the blue-collar workers who are the members of the super fund. And in this day and age of overpriced property, if those blue-collar workers fall on hard times, which they're guaranteed to do, and default, they will be foreclosed on by the bank, but on behalf of their own private superannuation fund, which is there to guarantee their retirement. Right? This is ridiculous. It's using the people as a source of looting to keep the banking system up. So, if the Irish know it's stealing, what's wrong with us Aussies? It's time to wise up. It's time for what the CEC has long proposed. We need the Homeowners and Bank Protection Bill to sort the banking crisis out, because they're actually in crisis, sort out the property mess such that the prices can be revalued to something that's affordable and people get to keep their homes, which is absolutely necessary. We need a proper social security system, right, such as in the style of Franklin Roosevelt's US one, and we need a revived economy based around a program of infrastructure development that things like people's retirement money can be invested in, guaranteed by the government, but in a way that makes the economy grow. So that's what the CEC, of course, is fighting for, unique among all political institutions in Australia. And every time the people in power come up with a new scheme, it just reinforces why people need to get behind the CEC. All right, so let's move on to the Murray-Darling Basin mobilisation. Now, we have a very special update today. We've been in full swing with this mobilisation since I announced it a couple of weeks ago. We've mass printed the New Citizen, and we're distributing across the basin. This week we had two very important deployments, one towards the top end, not quite in the basin, but in the Clarence River Valley, where we propose the Clarence River scheme that can divert extra water into the Murray-Darling Basin. We had a big crew of people led by Jan Picullis and Anne Lawler up there distributing papers in the towns of Grafton, etc. So you'll see future reports of that on our website. The LaRouche Youth Movement members of the CEC went to Swan Hill and to Albury for deployments in the southern part of the basin, and they set off fireworks absolutely everywhere they went. So for a live, or not a live, but for an on-the-ground report of that deployment, I'm now going to turn it over to Glen Isherwood, one of the leaders of the LaRouche Youth Movement, and he's reporting live. He's reporting from the town of Albury following a deployment they've just completed.
Hi, this is Glen Isherwood at Hume Dam. It's December 17th, and this report is coming to you just off the back of a deployment that the Citizens Electoral Council LaRouche Youth Movement had here at the Lake Hume Resort, where myself and Doug Mitchell, Lars Tystrip of the LYM, we got to intersect the state and federal water ministers, including Tony Burke, the new Minister for Water in Victoria, Peter Walsh, and others, to confront them on this Murray-Darling Basin plan and how it's going to destroy the farming food bowl of this country. So we got out this New Citizen to everyone there, almost everyone there. Lars Tystrip managed to get inside the venue where they're holding their meeting today to discuss the plan. I also got to speak to some people outside, including the ministers for New South Wales, South Australia. It's interesting, Tony Burke, as soon as he saw that we were with the LaRouche organisation globally, was very quickly on the defensive, saying, none of your stuff I'll ever take. So he obviously has got something up his nose. But what was important about this meeting is we got to confront them here on the back of all these meetings in the basin where farmers have been saying, look, this plan's going to ruin us, this plan is going to destroy our food bowl. And just to take a look at the campaign that the CEC is fighting right now, hopefully you're already aware, but this New Citizen newspaper, which just got printed, is going out all over the country as an organising weapon. Now, the New Citizen is the regular newspaper for the Citizens Electoral Council. We've produced 400,000 copies of this, which means we mean business. We haven't produced a print run of the New Citizen this big since 2007, when we last produced the New Citizen with the headline, "Global Warming is a Fraud." We came out swinging against this whole fraud of global warming. We fought the policy for a carbon trading, carbon tax, and all these things. And you saw from that more and more the population was organised around what this means for them, this policy, what it's going to do. It is a genocide agenda. It's a green genocide policy. And more people started picking up that. and we are able to turn the tide on that policy of global warming here in Australia. And we're doing the same already with this new citizen. You've seen, hopefully, that Lyndon LaRouche has been continually emphasizing we're in a global mass strike dynamic right now. Like Percy Shelley, the poet, said, there's times when the population can be transformed by powerful ideas. And when the going gets tough, when the the situation gets intense, the economic crisis worsens, we can intervene into it. And what we're seeing right now with the mass strike, all from Greece to Ireland to the United States to here in Australia, we can intervene into the dynamic with this type of material to show them that they're under attack and they have to mobilise and organise to get themselves out of that mess. So we delivered a message to that effect here today. I'll also just add that we are definitely getting on the nerves of these politicians. Just 2 days ago we were in Swan Hill for a Murray-Darling Basin meeting there, and Doug Mitchell got to ask a question challenging the Basin Authority on their incompetence, their scientific incompetence. And I also got to ask a question to which the Nationals member John Forrest got up and called for a point of order because he didn't want anyone politicking in his meeting. And what does that mean? Well, he didn't want anyone to expose the green agenda and the fact that the Liberal National Party are totally committed to the Water Act, which brings about this whole catastrophe for the basin. And in fact, after that event, John Forrest, the Nationals member, was protesting and exclaiming in a high-pitched voice that he fought very, very hard for that Water Act, and he didn't want to see it disappear. And that's the sentiment from these guys. And we have to challenge that. It is the Water Act. It is this environmental agenda. It is being pushed by an international grouping of environmental organisations, the World Wildlife Fund, emphatically, the Australian Conservation Foundation, the Wentworth Group, a front for the World Wildlife Fund. As you see documented in this paper, the whole push to cut the food bowl, to depopulate Australia, to depopulate the world, to lock up land for nature preserves, is all being coordinated out of Prince Philip's World Wildlife Fund. And that's the reality they don't want to face. And so the more we're on the ground, the more we're getting this paper out en masse, the more we can actually turn the tide on these guys. We can dump this environment agenda. We can go with major infrastructure, water projects, such as the Clarence scheme, such as the Bradfield, the Fitzroy schemes, also Nawapa on an international level. So look, to emphasise, if you haven't joined the CEC yet, you need to call us, talk to one of our organisers, and also grab a few bundles, a few hundred of this paper to get out to everyone in your area so they know who they're fighting and who we're up against. Because if you don't do it, I can tell you this food bowl is not going to last and this country is going to be destroyed. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Glenn. So that's it for the weekly update. It's also it for the regularly scheduled weekly updates for this year. We will resume regular weekly updates in the first week of January, so watch out for that. However, there will be breaking developments posted on our website regularly in between now and the 1st of January, including live updates like this if they're necessary. So make sure you watch that. Look out, especially next week, the CEC is going to produce a major statement on the Murray-Darling Basin in the name of Craig Isherwood, and it's going to be explosive when we produce it. So yeah, look out for that. So let's leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the new year.